Okay, hey guys. Welcome to my White Forest Masterclass Ultimate Guide, whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about making this video for a while, and with the new format coming up, I thought it would be a good time to just put like all the info that I have on this deck together and make something to help people who are either just starting to play the deck or maybe have been playing the deck for a little bit now. And yeah, I love this deck and I wanted to make something cool all based around the this strategy. So um real quick before we get into like all the details, I wanted to give you a background on why I'm making this video and my background with White Forest. So I've been playing this deck since it was released in Infinite Forbidden, which is a little over 9 months since this video is being recorded. And yeah, I've basically only played White Forest variations throughout that entire time. I did play Ryzeal briefly for a couple locals, but it wasn't my thing, and I missed White Forest, so I came back to it. Um, I've won a bunch of locals with every version of the deck. I've played Toy Box, Runic, Fiendsmith, and most recently the a heavier Azamina or Sinful Spoil build before going into the Alliance Insight format. And yeah, I've done pretty well with all of them. I know what I'm doing with this deck. I know the combos very well. I know how to play against other decks very well. And yeah, I've also been playing this deck on Master Duel a lot, so I have a lot of experience with it. The only thing I'm looking for adding to my, I guess, repertoire for the upcoming season is going to more regional and higher events with White Forest. Um, because of my job, unfortunately, when it comes to the weekend, I am very tired. I won't get into the specifics of what I do, but I'm a healthcare worker essentially, and yeah, when it comes to weekends, just going on trips to regionals is just it's just not where my head is at, and I just want to rest and be ready and have the energy so I can actually go to work for the next week. So it's a tough thing to balance, but with my schedule changing up a little bit soon, I'm hoping to be able to go to more regionals and maybe even the YCS or two. So that's gonna be really fun, and hopefully we'll see how I can do with White Force at a bigger event. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to for the future. So with this deck, I wanted to talk about a couple of the strong points and the weak points of the deck first before we get into any specifics. So the strong points of this deck is that it's a very heavy combo deck, so that means it has a very strong end board. We're going to be ending on a lot of cards that either negate, pop, Book of Eclipse type effects, um, and even with the new Vengeance Dragon, now we're putting our opponent's monsters into their spell and trap zone, which is a pretty strong effect actually. So yeah, and so this deck can have a very high ceiling for what it can do compared to other decks, and that's what it really gives you in like a meta um, environment. It meshes well with a bunch of different tech choices or archetypes. Um, the archetype is actually lore linked with Azamina, so you can actually in archetype go from your White Force cards and end up searching Sinful Spoil cards. You can't go the other way around, unfortunately. Not in lore, at least. There is a way with Magistus Chiroza, which you can do, which is possible and is definitely something worth thinking about and playing, but it does take a lot of resources, and you know that's something you'll have to think about for whether you want to play it or not. Also, Fiendsmith, I mean, it goes with pretty much every deck, but being light as well. Also, the Fiendsmith cards even place like with Requiem place themselves in the spell and trap zone, and that can just be something you use as the fodder for your White Force effects. Because a lot of the White Force effects send spells and traps from hand or field to grave for cost to activate their effects. So there's some added synergy with Fiendsmith there as well. Yeah, but the weak points of the deck is something very important to be aware of. Are generally speaking going to be floodgate type hand traps. So the Mulcharmies, Droll, Shifter. Thankfully, Shifter's at one now, so We don't really have to worry about that as much, but one is not zero, so it's still going to be around, and maybe in some people's side deck. You never know. Um, with the Molcharmies, Meows is essentially not an issue at all. It's not really going to do anything. Fulos is going to stop us from making our craziest end board, but it actually doesn't stop us from making a really decent half board. So it's honestly like it's not the best. Um, but it's one of those weird things because I haven't played against um other White Forest players that much. I played a few, but um it never really feels that great to play against because I can still just normal summon a Sylvie, Search of Woes, have a Book of Eclipse. I can summon Diabell Star, set an interruption, Book of Moon, or uh, the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. Wait, it's Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to go into Guardian Chimera. There's a lot of things I can do. Um, it's really Molcharmi Perulia that's the biggest issue for White Forest because almost all your extending comes from the hand. Elzet, Azumina Elzet, normal summoning your Sylvie, Diabell Star, you know, a lot of these things just it's giving your opponent too many draws if you do the full combo. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But still the card or the deck is still a really strong two card strategy. It's really good, but it also one last thing I want to point out with the weak points is compared to other decks, uh, because it is a two card combo strategy. It's usually a monster and a spell to send for cost. Um, that does make it slightly less efficient than other decks that play a lot of one card starters. Um, we need our hand advantage to be there, and that's something that you need to keep in mind when playing this deck. So the strategy, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind for this deck, whether it's the cards you choose to play, the sequencing of your plays, what hand traps you want to play, what hand traps you want to play around, kind of end board you make. It's all these things are very important. So a couple things I wanted to highlight. First are tech choices. A lot of people will say play one card, not another, and then you'll look at another list and people are playing like three of a card that no one else is playing and saying like, "Oh, I don't know why anyone is playing this." There's a lot of different ways to play this deck, and quite frankly, it's hard to say that one is really wrong than the other. Other than like very obvious, like probably playing one LZ, one Sylvie, um, three Azumina LZ. These are probably not the the best ratios, but they're different things, different tech choices that you can use that are going to be really good in different, um, different metas, different strategies against different decks. One card to keep in mind is Scourge of the White Forest. A lot of people don't play this card, but for example, if you find yourself coming up against a lot of board breakers in a certain format, this card's really good against that because it's a searchable out against board breakers like Thrust, Talents, um, Dark Holes, Lightning Storms, what have you. So something like that's good to keep in mind. Also, it's really important to know how to use Saint Azamina for OTKing. It's so funny that a lot of people don't know Saint Azamina's full effect. Honestly, they don't even really know any like most of the effects. When I go to locals and I keep summoning this card, it's actually kind of crazy how many times people keep reading it. Um, but it's also very important because it's definitely gonna come up. If I'm bringing this out, its rulings are gonna come up. So yeah, so knowing when to go into the Saint Azamina for OTKing is really important because if you can't OTK, it's probably best to use its effect to summon stuff that's going to help you put up just a stronger board and stop your opponent from comboing again or playing on their third turn if you're using it going second, obviously. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind because you don't want to be like caught summoning this thinking you're going to be able to go for game, summoning out maybe an Ilya Sylvia, and then oh they had something else that you need to negate, and now I just have like a Saint Azamina on board in attack mode that my opponent could like yeah, they'll take the damage from it, but if they run over it with like a, the Blue Eyes Link 1 has 300 attack, they're going to take the 300 attack, but St. Azamina doesn't get stopped from dying from battle. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Also, Snake Eyes Vengeance Dragon. This is a new synchro monster that we got with Alliance Insight. Very important to make sure that you're utilizing when you use its effects, its interruption effect, because kind of like Mirror Jade, its effect is once every other turn, so you can't use it the next turn after you use it. So it's very important to make sure, like, oh, if you're breaking a board and you leave it on your field, when you pass your turn, you're not going to be able to use it again on the next turn. It's essentially just going to be a big body sitting there and not going to be able to do anything. Um, yeah. A few other points. Sequencing is very important. Whether you want to start with your White Force cards first to bait out interaction and then go into your Azamina cards. So maybe go for like a St. Azamina OTK, or maybe you want to do the other way. You want to go into your Azamina cards first, you know, threaten a Ilya Sylvia, bait out interaction, and then combo off with your White Force, depending on the situation you're in, is very important. Then I think the last few things is probably just making sure you learn the best spots in this current meta or any meta that you're in. Right now we just started May. I'm recording this May 1st of 2025. So for whatever meta you're in, make sure you're making sure uh, what the current meta is and where the weak spots for, if you want to know what cards to pop, what places to use Silvera's Book of Eclipse effects, all that good stuff. And yeah, and also, this deck is one of those decks that has a lot of fans for it online. A lot of people enjoy White Forest and have a special place for it in their heart. So make sure that when you're playing, you're playing it the way you want to, and you're not just, you know, you're not discouraged if one YouTuber or one popular Yu-Gi-Oh player says like, oh, this is objectively correct, or if you're wrong if you play the deck this way. This deck is one of those things where it's like it's very variable. You're not like inherently wrong just for playing one way or the other. Yes, there are probably some things that are going to be maybe a bit weaker into a certain meta. People can have like decent knowledge on how to best play the strategy for a certain meta time period, but make sure that you're still able to experience um testing out different ideas with the deck, and playing with it and having fun. Speaking of which, this brings me to the one part of this deck right now that I have quite a different view on compared to a lot of YouTubers that you'll see online. So these are the Curse of Diabel and Filius Diabel, the new common Diabel cards that came out in Alliance Insight just recently. So the reason people play these cards is because you can dump Curse of Diabel with the new Diabels, the White Witch. You can dump it to the graveyard from your deck, and then Curse of Diabel will search you Filius Diabel. Filius Diabel can then activate to search you Diabel Star Vengeance, and then you can summon Diabel Star Vengeance using both Filius Diabel and Curse of Diabel. So it's a really efficient, way to get to your vengeance, but there's a couple issues I have with it. First of all, one of this deck's issues is draw, and I don't want any more cards in my deck that just super hard lose to draw more than I already do. I in my at the was it the Alliance Insight Premiere, I did have some of the cards already. In my last round against Malice, my opponent had, now this is not going to be all the time, but my opponent had 3 draws. Um, I did a search. He drawed me. I chained Wanted to that draw, and he chained another draw. And then the turn after, he chained another, which sucked because I still put him on like only having no cards in hand, and he had to get like one of his very few top decks that would actually allow him to combo. And unfortunately, he did get that, so I didn't end up losing that game. But it is what it is. But draw really hurts this deck, and I want to be more consistent with my deck as well, because with some of the meta decks out there right now, like having I need my non-engine. Like you're gonna need non-engine to beat Malice, to beat Mitsurugi, Ryzeal. These decks are gonna be very, very strong. So just having 2 cards in there that I just don't really want going second is important to me. Filius Diabel can summon Diabellstar Vengeance going second, so it's like it's not horrible, but it's like what are you going to pop with it? Because your opponent ends on like bounces and banishes and omni negates, and it's just going to be really difficult. It doesn't do for you as much as what like a non-engine would. And it's still actually very easy to summon Diabellstar Vengeance without this. And I have a quick combo here that I'm going to get into, and I'm going to explain it and how to go into your basic full combo with just LZ and a spell trap. Okay, this is going to be the combo for just starting with LZ and a random spell and trap. And this is going to show basically how to do the normal combo with this deck, but also how to do it without the Filius Diabell and Curse of Diabell, and why it shouldn't really matter once you get to a certain point in your combo, whether you use them or not, because once you get to a certain point, your opponent's only going to have certain hand traps that aren't going to stop you from doing that play. And I'll explain more about that when we get to it. But so here's the main 2-card combo. So we'll send any spell and trap to summon the, I'll put it in this column to add the Sylvie. We'll normal the Sylvie and use Sylvie effect to grab Tails. And maybe we'll put it up here. Then we're gonna synchro into Arciela. Use the effect sending the Tails to search for the Witches of the White Forest. And then we can reset the Tails. Then we activate the Tails and we add Azumina LZ of the White Forest. Then we're going to summon it and then synchro again. And we're gonna summon Diabell. And we're gonna go LZ 1, Diabell 2. We're just gonna add back the Tails because, that's the card we already searched in the combo. And then we are going to add Deception. This is, I think, a fairly important thing to add first instead of Wanted. Excuse me. But, yeah, so this is what we're gonna want to add. So I'll do the next part. So then we're gonna special summon Sylvie by putting back Arciela. Now here's the thing. So if we get to this point, it means our opponent hasn't ashed us because they would have ashed LZ. If they had imperm for Sylvie, that would have made things a little awkward and a little different, but it wouldn't have stopped our combos because we just searched this anyway. And so at this point, if your opponent hasn't interacted with you, the only thing left to worry about are either Bystials or Nibiru. And this combo is going to beat both of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate, I'll activate here, the Deception. And we're going to tribute the Sylvie. And we're going to add Hollowed. We are then going to activate Hollowed, summoning, where is it? Murcielago, and send the Deception. And then Murcielago is gonna use its effect to search us for a Wanted. And then here's the important thing. So normally what we do is we'd use Hollowed, target our Azumina LZ to put back, to add back. But if we do that and our opponent has a Bystial, that does kind of hurt. So what I like to do here is, because I don't really need this anymore, we're not going to use it. And actually with our end board, we kind of need space. So I'm going to use the effect, target this to put back. If your opponent, your opponent's not on, excuse me, not on Bystials, like they don't play deck, it just wouldn't make sense for them to play deck, you can probably risk it. But doing this means that they would have to nib you here if they were going to do it at all, for you to not get the add back. So it just depends on what you read they might have. And then we're going to activate Hollowed again. We're going to chain Wanted, and we're going to add Diabellstar Vengeance to our hand. Now, again, if we think our opponent might have Bystials, we wouldn't want to do this, but what we can do is we can just send both of these, because spells stay there until the end of the chain resolve. So both will be in our hand, and we can summon out Saint Azamina. And what we can do with Saint Azamina is use this effect when we summon it with player priority to summon Ilia Cilia. So if you think your opponent might have Bestials and you don't want them to have a gap or a window where they can Bestial your Vengeance, I just send the wanted, summon this, and then, keep this in hand. But because we can't summon it from the graveyard, and if we think our opponent isn't on Bestials, we can do that. So it works either way. So now we're at this point. We can activate the field spell to search the Diabelle's, the White Witch. Then we can use Diabelle's White Witch, sending the tails. We can also send this. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, doesn't really matter. But use the effect to summon it. And then with this, we're going to send Sinful Spoils of Slumber, Morian. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've been playing this for a while, but yeah. Cards in this archetype, that's okay. Just real quick, I don't know if y'all have noticed, there's a lot of people, and no hate to you YouTubers. I love watching the White Forest YouTubers, but a lot of people don't know how to pronounce certain cards. Like Arciela, that one took me a while. I had to ask my comment section. That one I get, but Elzette is not a hard one. I see a lot of people calling her Azette or something, and I don't know, that just bugs me a little, but anyway, not important. So now we are going to summon out Diabelle's Vengeance by banishing the Moraine and the tails, because that's probably going to be done with for now. And then what we can do is, instead of using Wanted to draw off of Deception, we can banish Wanted to put Moraine back in our, put the banish over here, back in our deck, and then we get just like a random draw. So yeah, so we didn't need the Curse of Diabelle or the Filius Diabelle. Those cards really lose a lot to draw, and the only times you're ever really going to need those cards specifically without going through your combo first is if the only thing you open is this, which is a 1-of, which means you kind of bricked already. And okay, so I go on and explain things a little bit more in here, but yeah, I think that's the main gist of it. It's these cards are definitely something that you don't need to be able to combo with. And actually, one thing that I haven't actually shown in here is that you can also combo with Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. You can end up, instead of searching the field spell, you can search Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, and you can just actually end up with using that effect to summon the Diabelle Star Vengeance from the hand. So there are plenty of ways to get Diabelle Star Vengeance out, and personally, I just don't think I need these two cards in my deck that are just taking up spots that I'd rather have for either non-engine or better consistency. So yeah. So yeah, let's quickly look at some deck profiles. So these aren't going to be exactly perfect. It depends on what you want. For this one, I have it at 40 cards. It would make perfect sense if you wanted to also maybe add the third field spell and go up to 41. It depends on how much you want to avoid getting yourself being locked out of the extra deck from dark monsters. The extra consistency, excuse me, is very nice. So it just depends on what you want. But excuse me, this is what a deck list might look like for more of a pure version. Yeah, we got 3 Sylvie, 3 Elzette, 1 Rusia, 1 Azmina Elzette, 1 Diabelle's the White Witch, and 1 Diabelle Star Vengeance as the main White Forest. And well, I guess Vengeance is a Diabelle Star monster, but that's the main lineup. In this list, Stellars is a very good card, I think, with the with the Witches of the White Forest field spell. She's definitely cuttable, I think. It sucks she's like a great card, and I think in the toy box version, it's still an absolute three of because uh sending Toy Soldier with it, even if it gets interrupted, you're still plussing off of Toy Soldier. So it's nowhere near as a negative in a deck like that than a deck like this. Um so yeah, there's still decent room for non-engine. I just put in what three Valor, three Imperm, three Joel, three Ash, three triple tactics, one talent for board breaking and also setting cards if you get, interrupted. You could play Nib instead of Droll. You could play Molcharmies in the main deck if you wanted. There's a lot of different things, but this is what the deck might look like. And then this might be a little blurry. Sorry if the image is a little like not that high quality, but this is what an extra deck might look like. I personally like playing all of the Azamina names. There's a new Azamina card that's just named Azamina. It's the one with the OCG logo in the fusion section. Um, that's I think more of a flex spot. It's not really needed. It's just if you want to play it, you can. Um, yeah, we can now play Snake Eyes Doom Dragon because we have the new Poplar of the White Forest, which is the new level 4 tuner synchro that we can summon on our opponent's turn, and it places 2 White Forests in our spell and trap zone from our graveyard. So Doom Dragon is now definitely a card that we can utilize in this deck. Guardian Chimera is still very good with Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. Chaos Angel is still pretty easy to make. And then, yeah, we have the new, not Diabell Star, the new Snake Eyes Vengeance Dragon. And then just SP's just a solid card to have in pretty much any deck. And so, if we need help breaking boards, it's a card that I go into with relative consistency. Um, but yeah, in this list, I don't have Chirozzo. You could take out the Azamina fusion for Chirozzo if you really wanted to. That combo does require a lot of resources to go down one line. So if you're stopped at one point, you're not gonna be able to um really use that. And for me, like when I go to locals, like I've used it maybe twice, that line twice over a couple weeks of going to locals. So it's not something that like comes up all that often. So yeah, and honestly, I also don't really think it was all that game changing. It really depends, but that's up to you if you want to go down that route. Another route, excuse me, that a lot of people probably will want to go down is the Fiendsmith version. So there's a couple cool things about this version. So this version isn't hindered as much by the field spell restriction because you can do your normal combo up into Diabell, like I showed in the video. You can then summon back Sylvie, and then instead of using Deception to tribute Sylvie to go into Azamina's, you can turn those into your Closed Moon, Requiem, do your Fiendsmith combo, and on a Hiking Wave Caesar or King High Wave Caesar, whatever, which insulates you from the Biru, and then you can activate the field spell you searched, and then get to your Diabell's the White Witch, and then Diabell's Star Vengeance that way. So that is one thing that this deck definitely has as a bonus. Does it have a higher ceiling? Probably slightly higher. But I do think it's slightly worse into Droll. Um, what I like about the other version is like I built it to try and avoid that. You're going to be playing more cards, so you're going to be seeing non-engine. You kind of want to side in a little less consistently, so which is a little unfortunate. You do have to run more bricks. In most people's lists now, they're running just one Engraver, one Lacrima, and then the one Sanct instead of the Lurie and Tract build. That's something you could also do, but again, with the new cards that we've added to this engine, um, I think people want to keep that down as much as possible. Um, so yeah, that's just another thing to keep in mind. Also, the extra deck is a lot tighter. You arguably don't even have room for Desiree, which is a really difficult thing to to make a Fiendsmith deck and just not have Desiree in it seems really, rough. You, if you did, you'd probably have to cut either Chaos Angel, Guardian Chimera, or Typhon. Um, Typhon you probably could cut okay, but I wouldn't really want to cut Guardian Chimera or Chaos Angel because Chaos Angel does really well with Fiendsmith cards, and Guardian Chimera is really good for like mid-range type board states. So it's really tough because you need the sequence and the Desiree too. So um yeah, but you on the bright side you do have an access to a Nibiru out through the spell lock of the locking you out of darks from the extra deck. And because we have that, we're just playing the Murcielago and the Ilya Sylvia. And yeah, and if you want, you can still use what is it, Queensmith and Paradise. Those plays are definitely still an option for you with this deck. So this is something else to keep in mind. But again, you'd have to play Desiree for that. So it really depends on the way you want to build your extra deck. So now I want to talk a little bit about sequencing, and this is one of like the most, I don't know, I think this is arguably one of the most important things about this deck is knowing which cards to activate first. Um, Basically, like because Droll is this deck's main weakness, um, what I want to do is I really want to make sure that I'm doing the best I can to really help not lose to that card. So having Wanted is really nice because we can set something with Diabell Star, which plays around Joel a little bit. But we have, as you can see here, we have Sylvie and Witches. This is like a pretend starting hand. Um, both of these search, so we're gonna be hit with Droll after these. Um, so if we want to get the most out of our cards, um, there's a couple things I wanted to keep in mind. So I mean, and even before I explain this, maybe you could like go over in your own head. Maybe you could pause the video and go, okay, what would I do first? Um, would I go Wanted draw phase? Would I go Sylvie search first, or would I go Witches search first? Um, and then play again. And this is what I would do. So what I would do is I would prioritize my cards in this way. So Sylvie would be my first search. So if it's game one, there's still gonna be some people who are maining Droll, unfortunately, especially if you go to locals. Locals is a very different environment from like a regional or YCS, where I wouldn't really expect that in the main for upcoming formats, but I definitely would expect it in the side. So going first, I would probably go with Sylvie first. And or game one, I would go with Sylvie first. And I would probably actually search Tails. Now, Tails would then get you into your, LZ, and then you could send the Infinite Impermanence that could get you into uh Azumina LZ, and you keep comboing that way, and that's all great. If this is game 2 or 3 and my opponent now knows what I'm playing, they've had a chance to side, my first action, depending on what I'm worried about, might be Sylvie searching Woes. It also depends if Woes is really good against my opponent and if I'd be okay with just passing on that. So if I go Sylvie search Woes and my opponent draws me, I'm like, okay, cool. I can chain Wanted. I can choose something to summon Diabell Star if I wanted to, and then set something. Or I could keep that for next, excuse me, for next turn. And I could set the Woes, I could set the Imperm, and I'd have Imperm Ash and Woes for my opponent's turn. If they don't have Droll, I could then go with Wanted into Diabell Star, which could go into Deception, tribute the Bellstar to search Azumina LZ, and then combo off that way, and then go into my level 6, then search LZ, and then keep going. But yeah, and if you get hit with a different hand trap, that you can then go to your Witches of the White Forest, which you want to leave to last if you can, because that locks you out of dark monsters from the extra deck. So I want to be able to threaten like an Ilya Sylvia as much as possible, and even like search stuff with Arceolago as well. So that's just going first. It really depends on what you prioritize or how you build the deck. If you have Fiendsmith cards, this is going to change a little bit too. Being able to get 2 cards on the field. If you can do that in a different way to get into your Fiendsmith plays, that's another thing you can absolutely prioritize. So some tech options that a lot of people use. Versus Toy Box, which is a great choice because the whole gimmick behind White Forest is sending spells and traps from hand or field to get their effects, and Toy Box on its own gets you the Toy Box itself, which is a spell you can send, but also sets Toy Soldier and Toy Tank, which are additional spells and traps that you can send, and they get bonus effects when you send them because they summon themselves as monsters, so they're also extenders. And then Toy Soldier also searches a light level 4 monster. So if you have Toy Box on the field, that is. So it's also very, very strong. So it's another thing to just keep in mind. It is a little weak to Detonator, so going second, it can be a little rough. Sometimes when I was even playing this version very briefly while in a Rhizio format, uh, I would end up just siding out Toy Box cards because it's just not worth it at that point. Um, but yeah, still really good option. And if you want to play more budget build, or there are different things you want to try out, definitely a solid choice. The Black Goat Lass is a very good card. It's a great discard for White Forest monsters. You can just go LZ, send it to the grave for cost, and then chain it to stop, like what people did a lot is if your opponent has like a Rhizio detonator, chain the Black Goat Laughs to stop your opponent's detonator from being able to activate its effects that turn. Very strong. The issue I have with it with this upcoming format is I don't see that to be as big of an issue for White Forest because I'm a little more concerned about Malice right now, and I think I'm going to see a lot more Malice than I am going to see Rhizio. Rhizio is really rough into draw right now, and it's yeah, it's still definitely out there. And Mitsurugi Rhizio is 1,000% going to be played, and it's one of the top decks. But it's one of those things where I don't know if that's going to really do enough for me because at the end of the day you can send it and they can just negate with cross on res, and that's just 2 cards out of your hand with your best searcher and extender gone too. So there's a lot of things that I would prefer to stop them with. But it is still a very good card and a very usable option. So if you're playing that and other people are playing that, which a lot of people are, I don't think that's wrong at all. And I think, it's definitely a valid option if that works for you. Super Poly might be an interesting card to look at in the next format. There are some funny cards that you can just completely break Malice's board with. Uh, going second, but it's also really strong in the mirror match. You're basically your opponent's board becomes your board. You fuse off the cards your opponent has, and you basically summon the exact same things to your side of the field. It's pretty funny, but it's also very strong. So if you end up seeing more White Forest at your locals, or we end up seeing more White Forest at regionals, maybe having this in the side deck might be a decent option, especially if it starts becoming usable against the other meta decks as well. And then we have the Millennium cards, which is actually a really cool kind of it's kind of like Toy Box, that it gives you a lot of spell and trap, or not trap, but it gives you a lot of spell fodder for your White Forest cards. And it also makes it really easy to summon Doom Dragon, so it can even like help break boards um, going second, or it could combo into Zombie Vampire to help you play more. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. Um, and then Delta of Invasion, or Invitation, excuse me, is a card that came out in Supreme Darkness. I I haven't tested a lot with it, but theoretically it sounds pretty decent because what you can do is you can use its effect to send a Eldritch the Golden Lord to your graveyard. You can then use Eldritch to send a spell or trap that you can set to your field to the grave to add it to your hand and then summon it. And then what Delta of Invitation allows you to do is then create a token, a zombie token, I think. And then you contribute that for the new Eldritch Fusion from Alliance Insight. And then you have 2 level 10s you can make of Rudris. And this is all before you searched. So, it's very, very strong. And I just think the reason it doesn't go straight into like a deck, like my deck list or probably most deck lists right now is because that's, a little bit extra for what we're trying to do, and it's gonna decrease consistency a little bit. But something you could do is you could try and mesh the Delta of Invitation cards with the toy box cards, and you could just get a lot of advantage that way, and it could help you just combo and play through hand traps and be really good that way. So maybe if we're in a hand trap heavy format where people are playing like Ash, Veiler, Imperm, they're playing even like uh, Ghost Mourners too, maybe that could be something you look for as well. So, okay, a couple important rulings. These are some things that it's really important to keep in mind when you're playing uh with these cards. And this is something that like I think the first one is I think the one that I think some people might get the most wrong because it works different ways at different times. So essentially when you use Hollowed Azamina to summon your Azamina monsters from the extra deck, uh the simple spoil cards you send to the graveyard have to be sent to the graveyard in order for you uh to get the summon of the monster from the extra deck. So Sinful Spoils of Slumber Morian, which is a really good card, can set itself from the graveyard if you control an illusion monster that's level 5 or higher, which is really strong. But when it leaves the field, it's going to be banished, which means that you technically can activate the Hollowed Azamina. It does meet the activation requirements. You could activate Hollowed Azamina, and if you attempt to send Morian, it will be sent. It will be banished instead of going to the grave, and then nothing will happen. You won't be able to summon any Azamina monster. This is very important, especially at a regional or higher event where your opponent will call you on that, and you know, if as at least if they know the ruling, and if not, you've essentially made an illegal play. But um, yeah, but it's very important to know. However, it's also very important to know that you can use a Morian that has been reset by its own effect if you're summoning a level 8 or higher Azamina monster and you use another Sinful Spoil card that is actually sent to the graveyard. So if at least one of your Sinful Spoil cards goes to the graveyard, then regardless of what you're summoning, the summon will go through. The Morium will still be banished if you reset it off its own effect, but as long as one other card, like say you have Hollowed Azamina and a Wanted, and maybe you already searched with Wanted, you're not going to chain it. Maybe you go Hollowed Azamina, you send the reset Morian, you send it to the banishment, and then you send the Wanted to the graveyard. Because at least one card went to the graveyard, you will be able to summon, like for example, a Saint Azamina or Morigina. So that's very important, very, very important to know. Another cool ruling that I'm not sure if this is going to be all that relevant, but it's something to keep in mind is that Sylvie's effect to search on normal or special can still activate after using its effect to reborn from grave. People don't usually declare the effect because, well, Sylvie gets reborn negated, and so it's not going to be able to search, which is, so it seems kind of pointless. However, you can legally activate it because it says the monster's effects are negated instead of you cannot activate this monster's effects. So one thing that I like to do, and I actually didn't see a lot of people doing this when White Forest Runic was a little more popular. When I was playing White Forest Runic, one of the things I would do is I'd activate like a flashing fire to interrupt my opponent, and I then chain Sylvie engrave targeting like maybe my Arciela to put back the extra deck to summon, and then on res, I could use Fountain to draw potentially 3 cards, and I could chain Sylvie to search, even though that search isn't going to go through. to chain block the Runic Fountain. So I could get my 3 draws. My opponent can Ash, Bell, Ogre me. You'd basically need like a targeting uh, negate or destruction, and I'd need to not have like a Hugin or a way to like stop it. So like it was really strong at like insulating my draw 3, which in Runic is very, very strong. So it's something to keep in mind that, you know, not, and this doesn't just work in the Runic version, you know, you can probably find applications for this uh for different times during, you know, using just like the White Force Azumina build. Okay, number 3. This is very important because I've already seen some people in my comments, and I actually didn't even know this to begin with. Uh, I found this out. I wouldn't say the hard way. I was attempting to OTK someone on Master Duel with this, and it wasn't working the way I thought it was, and then I realized, you know, or I found out that this it doesn't work this way. So Ilya Sylvia says that all the damage from your other Azumina monsters is doubled. And Saint Azumina says your opponent takes all battle damage that you would take. Unfortunately, Ilya Sylvia does not double that redirected damage, uh, which is really unfortunate because like if your opponent has like a Blue Eyes, uh, what's it, Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, which has 4K defense, you can't summon Saint Azumina and then summon Ilya Sylvia and then attack it with Saint Azumina and then have it do 4K but then do double and then do 8K for game. You cannot do that, unfortunately. Excuse me. But what you could do is you could Saint Azumina summon the Azumina Elzet from the deck in attack mode, and you have 2 monsters with 0 attack. And then you could attack twice into that 4K defense monster and then win that way. But it's very important that Azumina Ilya Sylvia double damage only applies for just normal attacks and normal damage. Very important to know. If you are using cards like Toy Box, it's also important to know that when the toy monsters are sent from the field to the grave, because they are set as spells and traps, so they do meet the activation requirement for the White Forest monsters. When they're sent, uh, they are recognized as monsters. So if you send them with Droplet or you send them with the White Forest monsters, they're recognized as monsters. So you would not be able to trigger an Stellar in the grave if you used LZ sending, like, say, a toy soldier. Um, and if you use Droplet sending a toy soldier, which is a very common thing because, you know, Toy Box also gives you, you know, is really good with Droplet because it gives you a lot of, you know, fodder for that too. Uh, it is also considered, they're also considered monsters. So your opponent can't respond with monsters if you just send um, the toy monsters that you set. So it doesn't matter what they were when you know, activated the card. It matters where they are when, you know, they're sent. So that's something important to keep in mind too. And the last important thing is less of a ruling. I mean, it's kind of a ruling, but it's just more of like a tip too. I did have it briefly in the video that I was explaining the combos with, but um, spells and traps that will go to the graveyard when the entire chain resolves. So you can go, what is it, Hollowed Azumina, Chain Wanted Seeker of the Sinful Spoils to search Diabellstar Vengeance, which, if you read its card text, says in parentheses that it says this is always treated as a Sinful Spoil card. So on res, you'll have the Wanted on the field and the Diabellstar in hand, and then you can send 2 to actually summon like a Saint Azumina. So now it's actually really cool because Hollowed plus Wanted actually gets you, you know, two two Sinful Spoil names instead of just the one, which is something that we did not have before Diabellstar Vengeance. So yeah, something else just to keep in mind. And then just like a brief look. Oops, almost done. Just a brief look at the upcoming meta. Um, it's difficult without like looking over like long replays that to talk about exactly what to hit and like how to play against different decks, but um just like a brief overview of what you're probably going to be seeing with this deck in the upcoming format. is you're going to be seeing a lot of Malice, a lot of Mitsurugi and Mitsurugi Raizio. You're probably still going to see some Mermail floating around. Uh, Maybe like a little jump scare here and there. It's not going to be too common, but it's still going to be around. You have a lot of different Fiendsmith decks. You're going to have like probably Bestial Fiendsmith, Kashtira Fiendsmith, which is a little less common now, but then you also have Memento. That's also one I guess you could put in the Fiendsmith uh you know kind of category, although uh there are many versions that don't play Fiendsmith. That's like they play like the Goblin version instead, which is very good, and that one of YCS is very, very strong. Um, you might see a little more White Forests, you know, at your locals or at regionals. It makes me happy to see because I love the deck, and I'm also very familiar with it. So if I have some decent interruptions, I'll usually know when best to hit them. But yeah, cards like Lancia, Droll, Molcharmies are gonna be good in the side. Um, Knowing how to combo Nibiru with Saint Azamina. Nibiru is really good with Saint Azamina because you can nib a big. If you end up being able to nib a big field and have like a big token, it's really dangerous for your opponent because you can, if you summon Saint Azamina, you can just really quickly just OTK them, and that can be really strong. So, um, yeah, the meta looks very combo heavy. You know, we have like mid-range decks like Fiendsmith control variations. I haven't put also, other honorable mentions, Blue Eyes, the new what's it called? Live Twin cards, which are also used with Fiendsmith. There are some like mid-range decks out there too, but I think a lot of this meta is going to be very combo heavy. So there's going to be, I think, a little less uh focus on, oh, you ash this one weak point uh in this meta, and more of, did I draw my floodgate out? Did I draw my Lancey? Did I draw my Drolls, my Molcharmies? um I don't think this is going to be the best meta in my opinion. This upcoming meta is going to be the best in my opinion, but I could be stand corrected. I think White Forest is a solid tier 2 option. I think it's definitely uh, something that has a lot of power and is very scary if it goes first and if it's not stopped. But yeah, there are some other very scary decks. The upcoming meta with Malice is gonna be a little scary in my opinion, and then Miss Rugi Ryziel, just Detonator's still around a bit. I don't think it'll be as was it? I don't think it'll be as annoying or as common, and because of the hits to Ryzo, I think you're also gonna see uh some more heavier impact with Droll on the deck. So, it really just depends on how things go. So, yeah, just knowing your opponent's deck, where they're weak, and making sure you're siding and knowing how to use your interruptions well. I think this upcoming format, it's gonna be really interesting, and I can't wait to see what people do with it. So, um, we're at a little over 50 minutes. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. There's a lot of stuff that like I could put in this video. I could make this a few hours long and add in like replay reviews and stuff. And there's a lot of things that I could talk about, but I think it's important I just wanted to get like the basics and some important things into one video, and to have like a general guide that people can look at and just say, okay, I think I understand this deck a little better than I did before. And so, hopefully that's what I did. In the future, I'm gonna be posting more replays, or not replays, well, maybe replays. We'll see how that goes. But I mean, live duels at my locals with this deck. I'm going to be doing more like deck profiles, and we'll see what I what other stuff I might come up with. I will be still testing with some other decks too, but White Force is still my absolute favorite deck. It's my pet deck. It's what I've been playing forever. So If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments, I'm going to be like responding to every single one and answering any questions or any like, anything you have to say really. Just, as long as it's respectful and positive, or constructive, that's all I really care about. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch